Andrews no longer had control. Panic had completely consumed him, and his mind, which had once been able to focus on small tasks and the monotony of space travel, was now in a state of absolute desperation. He felt the air growing thick and heavy in his control capsule, but he could also sense the presence of danger closing in. It was no longer just a vague feeling of being watched. Now he knew something was there, ready to strike. The alarm kept blaring on his control panel, its beeps echoing like a countdown. The ship was in emergency mode, but the systems were becoming increasingly unstable. The lights flickered erratically, casting shadows that seemed to come alive. In one of those shadows, he saw something move. It wasn't a reflection, it wasn't his imagination. Something was moving in the darkness. Before he could react, the sound of claws tearing through metal rang out through the room. It was a deafening, visceral noise that made Andrews jump back. He knew what was happening now. The alien had breached his ship. He didn't know how, but the creature had found a way into the control room and was now lurking, waiting for the right moment to attack. Terror seized his senses, but his mind began to race frantically. He couldn't run. The ship was in poor condition. The communication system was offline, and any attempt to launch now would likely result in a catastrophic failure. The only thing he could do was face the threat head-on. He quickly turned and without thinking fired the ship's defense weapon, a basic laser system designed to prevent collisions with space debris. The sound of the shot sliced through the air, but the impact wasn't enough. The alien wasn't decisively hit, but the flash of the laser briefly illuminated the room, revealing a large, horrific figure with tentacles and claws extending grotesquely, adapting to the environment. It was a nightmare, with eyes fixed on Andrews, as though it already knew every move he would make. The alien didn't attack immediately. It seemed to study Andrews, almost as if it were enjoying his fear, his anguish. The ship, once a safe space, had now become a hunting ground, and Andrews was the prey. In a burst of instinct, he did what he had to do. He ran. He ran through the ship's corridors, aimlessly, just trying to escape the monstrosity that was following him. The sound of his footsteps echoed through the metal of the ship while the creature continued to move, silent and fast, tracking the sound of his ragged breathing. Andrews passed by several doors, trying to lock them behind him, but the creature simply forced them open, its claws scraping the walls, leaving deep marks. Each step he took felt harder than the last, his fear consuming him, but he had no choice but to keep going. Panic wouldn't let him stop. He burst into a storage room and slammed the door behind him, gasping for air, but the sound of something banging against the outer wall of the room made him realize that he was still not safe. The ship had now become his prison, and the threat to his life was closer than ever. He had to escape, quickly, but the only thing he knew for certain was that he had to fight or die. The alien advanced with supernatural speed, its body of tentacles and claws stretching toward Andrews, who could barely keep his footing. Panic consumed him, but at the same time, something deeper began to form within him. The need to fight. He knew that if he didn't do something now, the creature would destroy him slowly and brutally. The ship was already on its last breath, its systems failing, and time was running out. Andrews looked around desperately. Everything seemed a blur, a sequence of flashes and shadows, but then, amidst the chaos, his eyes locked onto a broken pipe lying next to one of the walls of the control room. He didn't know why, but he knew it was his only chance. With no other options, he acted. With the last of his strength, he lunged toward the pipe, dragging it toward the alien that was closing in at a deadly speed. The sound of the creature leaping toward him made his heart almost stop, but he didn't hesitate. The pipe was there, his last hope for survival. As the alien jumped, with the ferocity of a hungry beast, Andrews shoved the pipe forward, right into the creature's path. The impact was brutal. The alien, coming with full force, impaled itself on the broken pipe, the sharp end piercing its grotesque body. The sound of metal tearing through alien flesh was almost as deafening as the creature's roar, as it writhed violently. The alien tried to free itself, but the damage was irreparable. It no longer had the strength to continue the fight. The ship, already damaged by the presence of the creature and the numerous injuries Anders had suffered during his escape attempts, went into self-destruct mode. The lights flickered frantically, and the emergency alarm blared incessantly. The fate of both was sealed. There was nothing more to be done. It was over. In those final moments, as the alien's body collapsed lifelessly to the ground, Anders felt a crushing pressure in his chest. He glanced at the screen in front of him, where the self-destruct countdown began flashing in red, bright numbers. It was now or never. With what little strength he had left, he slowly pulled away from the control panel. His eyes were clouded, and his exhausted mind began to drift toward the happiest moments of his life. He saw the image of his wife and daughter, the yellowed photograph he always carried with him, his most cherished memory. He remembered the happy mornings, the laughter they shared, the small moments that now seemed so distant. He saw himself one afternoon in the backyard of their house, playing with his daughter, laughing at her antics, his wife's sweet voice in the background, telling him he should stop playing and help with the chores. The joy of those days seemed so simple, so true, that he almost felt he could touch it again. But that was all he had now, a distant, irreparable memory. The destruction countdown was nearing 0. In his final moments, he looked at the photograph on his control panel. With tears in his eyes, he took one last breath. He shouted their names, his final words a desperate cry, an attempt to reach for something lost. And then, the ship exploded. The blinding light of the explosion engulfed everything around, a hellish wave of heat and force that vaporized any trace of hope. The ship, the alien, Anders, everything disintegrated in an instant. But deep in the void of space, the memory of his family remained, shining in his mind until his last breath.